The plane was primed for departure from Chicago to Atlanta, passengers easing into their seats aboard Horizon Airlines. Yet in first class, a flight attendant hovered over a young girl, her tone cutting through the hum. "You need to move, this seat isn't for you." Ava Johnson, 13, gripped her ticket tightly, confusion clouding her dark eyes. "But this is my seat." The flight attendant shook her head firmly.
"I don't think so."
Passengers shifted to look, some murmuring under their breath, others acting like they didn't notice. No one stepped in. What the flight attendant didn't realize was that Ava's father owned the airline, and by the time this plane touched down, she'd wish she'd never spoken a word. Before we dive into this tale, drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're tuning in from today. And if you find this story gripping, be sure to like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell so you won't miss any future videos. Ava sat quietly in her first-class seat, her hands resting calmly on the armrests as she peered out the small oval window. The rumble of the airplane buzzed in her ears, blending with the murmurs of passengers getting comfortable. Her heart raced, but not from fear. She was thrilled. This was her first solo flight, a gift from her father, Malcolm Hayes, for nailing her midterm exams. The ticket meant more than just the luxury surrounding her. It was a badge of her effort and success. She adjusted her seatbelt, taking in the roomy cabin. Plush leather seats, warm lighting, flight attendants gliding effortlessly from row to row, serving drinks to passengers who hardly glanced up from their screens. She fit here, and she knew it. The excitement lasted only a few fleeting minutes before it was abruptly halted. A sharp voice sliced through her thoughts. "Excuse me, young lady," a flight attendant declared, towering over her with hands firmly on her hips. Her name tag, Elizabeth Harper, or Liz, shone under the gentle cabin lights, her uniform immaculate, her face a mask, though her eyes carried an icy edge. Ava looked up, puzzled but courteous despite the sting. "Yes?" Lizzie's eyes skimmed over her, then settled on the ticket in her grasp. "Are you certain this is your seat?" Her voice rang out, loud enough for nearby passengers to catch. Heads swiveled, people shifted uneasily, feigning disinterest. Ava nodded swiftly, digging into the pocket of her hoodie to retrieve her ticket. "Yes, ma'am, seat 3B. Liz snatched it, giving it a cursory glance before shaking her head dismissively. "This is a first-class seat." "I know," Ava replied, sitting taller in defiance. Liz's lips compressed into a tight line of disapproval. "Where are your parents?" Ava's stomach clenched at the question. "I'm traveling by myself." Liz's expression stayed blank, but her stance shifted. She squared her shoulders as if gearing up for a challenge. "I see," she said coolly, handing the ticket back. "Unfortunately, there's clearly been an error. This seat's reserved exclusively for first-class passengers." Ava blinked, her fingers tightening around the ticket's edges. "I am a first-class passenger." Liz's smile was strained, almost artificial. "I think there's been a mix-up. You need to gather your belongings and head to economy." A stillness blanketed the nearby rows. The businessman beside her fidgeted in his seat, pretending to focus on his newspaper's headlines. A woman 2 seats up adjusted her sunglasses, stealing a quick peek but offering no words. No one stepped in, no one challenged it. Ava wavered, a flush creeping up her neck to her cheeks. She glanced down at her ticket once more, as if rechecking might alter the outcome. "But this is my seat." Liz sighed, her patience visibly fraying at the edges. "Miss, I'm asking you politely, you need to move." Ava's throat constricted. She wasn't making a scene, wasn't raising her voice. She just wanted to stay where she'd been assigned. But with every passing second, resisting grew tougher. Passengers stared, her ears burned under their scrutiny. She felt their judgment, the silent assumptions thick in the air around her. She'd done nothing wrong, yet here she stood, being loudly told she didn't fit in. Slowly, with reluctance, Ava bent down, scooped up her backpack, and rose to her feet. Her legs trembled slightly as she moved into the aisle. Liz offered no assistance, just pivoted, gesturing toward the plane's rear. "Right this way." Ava shuffled past the rows of first-class seats, past passengers who'd seen it all unfold but kept their silence. Her gaze stayed fixed ahead, her chest tight with emotion. She refused to let them glimpse her expression. She wouldn't let them witness how deeply this moment cut. As Ava stepped into the economy section, she eased herself into an empty seat, clutching the armrests tightly. The seat felt narrower, the space more confined, the air somehow thicker. She drew a deep breath to calm her nerves. Then, almost instinctively, she grabbed her phone and typed a quick text. "They forced me to the back, said I didn't belong in first class. I showed my ticket, but she wouldn't believe me." She paused, staring at the words for a moment, before hitting send. Her phone buzzed almost instantly with a reply. "What do you mean they forced you to move? Who did it?" Her father's words were brief, pointed, not frantic but intense. Ava paused before responding. "The flight attendant. She claimed it was a mix-up, ignored me completely." This time the reply lagged. The dots danced on her screen for a full 5 seconds before a new text popped up. "What's the flight number?" Her fingers quivered as she checked her boarding pass and typed it out. She sent it and watched the screen, holding her breath. The answer came fast. "Stay put. I'll take care of it." Ava let out a slow breath, shutting her eyes briefly. She wasn't sure exactly what her father, Malcolm Hayes, meant, but his tone hinted this was far from finished, not by a long shot. She perched rigidly in the economy seat, her hands clutching her backpack's straps. The thrill she'd felt just moments earlier had morphed into something heavier. Shame, bewilderment, anger. The murmurs from first class lingered in her head. No one had stood up for her. Not a single soul had urged Liz to double-check. They'd all just sat there, watching. Her phone hummed again. She swiftly pulled it out and scanned the text. "Don't budge, don't talk to her anymore, just hold tight." Her dad, Malcolm Hayes, never lost his cool. He tackled everything with steady, calculated precision. That message alone assured her something was already in motion behind the scenes. Meanwhile, up at the front of the plane, the flight attendant, Liz Harper, strode back to the galley with a smug air of triumph, another issue neatly resolved. She snatched a stack of drink menus and started distributing them to first-class passengers, as if the earlier scene never occurred. A younger flight attendant, Kayla Brooks, paused as she set a tray of glasses on the counter nearby. She'd witnessed it all. How Liz's tone had bitten harder, how she'd skipped checking the system before concluding Ava didn't belong. Kayla itched to speak up, but held back. Liz Harper had clocked over 15 years with Horizon Airlines. She was the kind who dictated cabin rules, written or otherwise. "Was there an issue with her ticket?" Kayla asked cautiously, her voice hushed. Liz scoffed, tugging her uniform straight. "Please, you saw her. Do you honestly think she shelled out for first class?" Kayla's gut twisted. She'd worked countless flights, seen folks from every walk of life in first class, but Liz's words carried a sting that unsettled her. "But you didn't even look at the system." Liz flicked her hand dismissively. "Trust me, I've been at this for years. I can spot when someone's in the wrong spot. The quicker they get that, the better." Kayla clamped her jaw shut. The response felt off, but what could she do? Confront a veteran? Stir up a fuss? She turned back to arranging trays, trying to shake the knot in her stomach. Then the intercom buzzed sharply. "Ms. Harper, report to the cockpit immediately." Her hand stalled mid-motion. She glanced toward the plane's front, her smug look wavering for a fleeting second. The other flight attendants swapped quick glances. A cockpit summons during service wasn't routine. Something was clearly amiss. Liz squared her shoulders, smoothing her uniform before heading toward the front. As she moved through first class, she caught a few passengers peeking up from their devices, picking up on the subtle tension shift. The instant she entered the cockpit, the vibe turned heavy. Captain Daniel Dan Rivera, a veteran pilot with silver-streaked hair, swiveled to face her. He wasn't alone. On the in-flight phone's small screen, a live video showed a man in a sleek high-rise office, hands clasped neatly before him. His face gave nothing away, but his mere presence sent a shiver racing down her spine. "Ms. Harper," the man on the screen said, "do you know who I am?" She swallowed hard, shaking her head. "No, sir." Captain Rivera's voice cut in, steady and firm. "This is Malcolm Hayes, owner of Horizon Airlines." Her breath snagged in her throat. "You removed his daughter from first class?" the captain pressed on, "without confirming her ticket, without consulting the system, without any basis." Liz's stomach lurched. Her face paled as the blood drained away. The man on the screen stayed calm, showing no rage, but his next words buckled her knees. "You'll turn around, head back to economy, and personally escort my daughter to her seat. When this flight lands, you'll answer to the executive board." The screen went blank. For the first time in her 15-year career, Liz felt a sensation she'd never known: raw panic. She stood rooted in the cockpit, her breaths quickening beyond her control. The gravity of the moment draped over her like a suffocating shroud. The owner of Horizon Airlines, the man who approved her pay, who could shape her entire career, had called her out directly. This wasn't a mere passenger gripe or a routine system report. This was monumental, a situation she'd never navigated before. Captain Rivera shot her a piercing glance. "Well, you heard him." Liz swallowed hard, nodding rigidly. Her legs felt unsteady as she turned and exited the cockpit, heading back toward the cabin. The murmuring passengers, the soft drone of the engines, the very air, it all seemed altered now. Moving through first class, she sensed the weight of their stares. Some flicked their eyes her way, catching the shift in tension, while others dodged her gaze entirely. No one grasped the full situation, but they could tell something had flipped. Liz reached the curtain dividing first class from economy. Her fingers lingered over the fabric for a brief moment before she drew it aside and stepped in. The second she entered the economy section, she saw her. Ava sat by the window, her expression serene yet guarded. Her small backpack rested under the seat ahead, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't sobbing, wasn't causing a stir, just sitting quietly. But that calm stillness sent a pang through Liz's stomach. Passengers in nearby rows looked up, their interest sparked anew. They'd caught the earlier incident. Now they watched again, eager to see her next move. Liz cleared her throat, bending slightly to meet Ava's eyes. "Miss," she said, her tone softer than before, "there's been a mix-up. I'd like to guide you back to your rightful seat in first class." "A mix-up?" Liz nodded rapidly. Yes, a seating glitch occurred. Ava's gaze held hers, keen and unwavering. "But I showed you my ticket, you saw it, and still made me leave." A few passengers traded looks. They'd overheard it all before and knew she was spot on. Liz swallowed a lump in her throat. "I might have misjudged the situation," she said cautiously, "but I'd like to set it right now. Please, follow me." Ava didn't stir immediately. She didn't shout or protest, just studied Liz, her silence dragging on longer than Liz could bear. Then she picked up her phone and typed a swift message. Moments later, Liz's work tablet buzzed. She fumbled it from her pocket, her hands trembling as she read the note forwarded from Horizon's executive office. "Take your time. Make her grasp what she did." Her pulse hammered in her chest. Ava met her eyes again, her voice steady. "I'll return, but I want to know why you figured I didn't fit there." A ripple of murmurs spread among nearby passengers. Some straightened in their seats, others leaned to whisper. Liz tensed up. I didn't mean..." "But you did," Ava cut in. Her tone stayed even, not harsh, just firm. "You didn't check anyone else's ticket in first class, only mine. Why?" A heavy silence lingered. Liz's cheeks flared with heat. She wasn't accustomed to being challenged, to justifying her actions. For years she'd steered these moments with ease, but now that power had slipped from her grip and she couldn't claw it back. She drew a trembling breath. I misjudged you." Ava said nothing, letting the admission hang, letting Liz bear its weight. Then, without a further word, she hoisted her backpack and brushed past her. The trek back to first class wasn't a triumphant strut. It lacked swagger or pride. Just a quiet, poised walk that somehow carried more impact. First-class passengers turned as Ava stepped in. Some registered surprise. Others averted their eyes, ashamed they'd seen her earlier disgrace, and stayed mute. Liz trailed behind, shrinking with each step. Ava reached her seat, settled in, and calmly set her backpack beside her. Liz hovered awkwardly, unsure of her next words. "If you need anything at all," she muttered, "just let me know." Ava merely opened her book and turned a page, her silence signaling the talk was done. Liz pivoted stiffly and hastened back to the galley, her face ablaze with shame. She'd never felt so laid bare, so utterly robbed of her command. And she had no clue what lay ahead. Liz's strides grew heavier with each step as she trudged back to the galley. Her cheeks blazed, and her typically pristine uniform now felt constricting, almost choking. She'd spent years upholding the rules, ensuring the cabin flowed seamlessly, managing passengers on her terms. But this time, she'd blundered, and in full view of everyone. Reaching the galley, she let out a jagged breath, clutching the counter's edge. The other flight attendants dodged her eyes, but their silent judgment hung thick in the air. Kayla Brooks shifted uneasily before speaking up. "You holding up?" she asked, her tone wary. Liz fired her a cutting glare. "I don't want your pity." Kayla lifted a hand slightly. "Not pity, just curious if you're braced for what's hitting when we land." Liz's spine went rigid. "Nothing's hitting, it was a mix-up, that's all." Kayla let out a soft scoff, folding her arms. "A mix-up?" she echoed dryly, "because from my angle, it looked like you pegged a first-class passenger as out of place based on nothing but her looks." Liz's jaw tightened hard. "I stuck to protocol." Kayla's brows arched. "Did you? 'Cause I don't recall protocol telling you to shift a passenger without checking the manifest, or grilling a girl about her parents when her name's right there on the list." Liz turned her gaze aside, her fingers digging into the counter's rim. She loathed this, being prodded, being second-guessed. Worse still was the unease seeping into her chest, the faint nagging whisper in her mind admitting Kayla had a point. She'd presumed. She'd sized up Ava and concluded without proof she didn't fit. And now it was plain to everyone. Before she could muster a reply, the in-flight phone shrilled. The noise jolted fresh tension up her spine. Kayla shot her a knowing glance. "That's probably for you." Liz gulped, then lifted the receiver with effort. "This is Harper," she said, striving to steady her voice. A deep, composed voice answered. "This is Malcolm Hayes." Her grip on the phone clenched. "You'll personally submit a detailed incident report once this flight lands," Hayes stated, his tone icy and unyielding. "I want a full account of why my daughter was ousted from her seat despite a valid ticket." Liz parted her lips, but no sound emerged. "You'll also ensure my daughter gets the same service as every other first-class passenger for the rest of this flight," Hayes pressed on. "Nothing short of that." "Yes, sir," she murmured faintly. The call cut off with a quiet click. Liz set the phone down and slumped against the counter, her palms slick with sweat. She'd committed a grave error, one she couldn't erase. Now it wasn't just a passenger issue, it was the man who ruled the skies she flew through. Liz stood rigid in the galley, the call's burden pinning her down like a lead weight. Her hands quivered as she adjusted her uniform, willing herself to hold it together. But inwardly she was fraying apart. This wasn't some standard gripe or a passenger she could wave off. She'd shamed the daughter of the airline's top power, and now the fallout loomed ahead. Kayla kept eyeing her, arms folded, awaiting a response. Liz spun around sharply. "Don't you have work to do?" she barked. Kayla shrugged casually. "Finished it." "Unlike some, I stick to protocol." Liz's jaw locked tight as she stepped out of the galley. She'd never craved a flight's end so desperately. As Liz re-entered first class, she willed herself to square her shoulders. She had to seem composed, as if she still held the reins, but as she glided down the aisle, she sensed it, the change. The air carried a new weight. Passengers who'd once dismissed her now eyed her with intrigue, some with subtle glee, others with barely masked disdain. They'd seen it all unfold. Her escorting Ava out, and now they observed her return, aware she'd been compelled to mend her error. At the front of first class, Ava lounged easily in her seat, leafing through the in-flight magazine, her demeanor relaxed. She didn't glance up as Liz neared. For a beat, Liz faltered. She'd never stood here before, facing a passenger she'd attempted to diminish, now stripped of her own leverage. She cleared her throat. "Can I get you a drink?" she asked, straining to keep her tone polished as ever. "Perhaps a snack?" Ava didn't answer right away. She flipped a page in the magazine, as if weighing whether to bother with Liz at all. Then at last she looked up. "A drink?" she echoed, her voice level. "Yes," Liz replied hastily. "Anything you want. Fresh juice, sparkling water, tea?" Ava tilted her head a touch. "You didn't offer that earlier." Liz blinked. "Pardon?" "When I first sat here," Ava said, her tone steady yet firm, "you didn't bring me anything. You didn't even welcome me like the other first-class folks." Heat flooded Liz's face. I didn't intend—" "But you did," Ava cut in. "You just didn't think I'd call you out on it." Nearby passengers hushed, their focus locking onto the exchange. Liz's breath quickened. She'd always dictated the terms, ensured things bent to her will, but now she faced a girl unafraid to make her answer for it.